Good evening, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We are gathered here in one of the usual sessions at the end of each month from Women Platform or Iraqi Women Humanities Scholars. Today, we are having a special guest, a guest that we are all proud to have, Mrs. Sumia AL Kaissi. And to introduce Sumia Al Kaissi is something really overwhelming to me. I've read her bio and I'm impressed by it. And I think you will see it in front of you on the screen. But I will try to summarize the highlights of that bio. Mrs. Sumia grew up in Manchester, UK, and she developed a fondness for English language and its literature at a very early age. She had 2 master's degrees, one from University of Baghdad, the other from Canada, and she has a diploma in TESOL from the UK and a teaching certificate from London. She got a degree in a bachelor degree in education from the University of Alberta, Canada, and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Baghdad. She majored in literature and minored in English as a second language. Her first actual teaching experience and training was a very brief one in Iraq. Then she moved after she got her second, after getting her master's degree from Iraq, she moved to Libya, and she had an experience of teaching there. And then she moved she taught in Omar al-Mukhtar University in Libya. Then she moved to Toronto, taught English as a second language, and then she got her second master's degree. Then she moved to Edmonton, Alberta, and in that place where she got through several programs of teaching, and she taught in Edmonton public schools, and she became part of the board of the schools there. Since 2022, she moved to Qatar, Doha, where she is now the head of the Academy of Blythe Academy. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
You are.
And then now she is with us here. You can see the list of her experience, which is quite impressive. She's the head of the Blythe Academy, Humanities Department. She moved in culture and media. She taught English and Arabic as a second language. She worked with refugees, and she created lots of groups where she practices teaching. Today, she is going to present to us her experience with teaching Shakespeare, a very special experience. And I'm very proudly saying that you will have the feeling that I had when I looked at her slideshows, that I am in front of not only a professional teacher, but a teacher who loves what she is doing. Mrs. Sumia, we are very happy and honored to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ali. I really enjoyed listening to my resume and brief background from you. I enjoyed it so much. First of all, thank you, Dr. Muna Al-Alwan, for allowing me this opportunity. It's an interesting and very beautiful opportunity for me, and thank you, Dr. Ali, again. I'll be presenting my slides, my screen now, and I'll turn off my camera. I'll turn it back on when I'm done, just to allow for the Q&A. So bear with me while I present. Dr. Ali, everything looks good from your end?
It's perfect. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So as Dr. Alia mentioned, my name is Sumia AL Kaissi. I did my bachelor's and master's in the University of Baghdad. Dr. Amy Square was my supervisor. I'm so happy that she's here. Today, I'll be talking about a few strategies to teaching Shakespeare in the classroom. So I'll be talking about pedagogical strategies. I'll be talking about instructional strategies, assessments, and the challenges at the end when after teaching. I believe we've all heard this one point of our lives. I know I have. Students always ask me, when am I ever going to be using thee and thou in real life? When are we ever going to be studying the language of Shakespeare or speaking the language of Shakespeare? I have these encounters almost every day. So when I do get these encounters, this is what I tell my students. As a teacher of Shakespeare, I hear this complaint a lot. And here's what I tell them. In order to test the language proficiency of an advanced English language learner, students in that sense, any student has to be tested against the best that was written in the language. They need to be exposed to the highest standards in that language in terms of vocabulary and lexicon. So from a socialist point of view, Shakespeare is the only author who used over 25,000 words and introduced about 1,700 original words. Some of them are, actually we do use every single day, words like lonely, like laughingstock, like frugal, dwindle, and feisty when he speaks of the shrew. And that's why we study the Shakespearean language from an educational and a literary perspective point of view. I also tell them we need to study Shakespeare from the aesthetic and literary merits that the language has. The language has developed tremendously, as you all know, from Old English to now. So what I do to have my students appreciate the aesthetic part of the language, first day, I put 4 pictures on the board, on my screen. Beowulf, Chaucer, Shakespeare, and modern language. And I ask them, what do you see on the board? What attracts your attention? Can you read Beowulf? They say, no, we cannot. Can you read Chaucer? Somehow we can. Yes, a few words. Difficult, but we can find our way. And then Shakespeare, it's clearer, they say. And then finally, modern day language. So I try to tell them, because of the introduction of the Shakespearean language into the English language, we're privileged to have English as we know it today. The third reason why I ask my students, or why I tell my students why we study Shakespeare, is for the depth of characters and the universality of the theme. Shakespeare teaches about the human condition, the ethical dilemma that are still well and alive even after 500 years. Who can forget the greed for power, the jealousy, revenge, the marginalization of the other, doubt, and so on in the characters? These all allow for the growth of our moral sensibility and social conduct. The universality of his themes make his characters relatable, and that's what we look for in teaching. So for these reasons, I try to tell my students studying Shakespearean drama is very important. When it comes to teaching Shakespeare, it's not an easy task. It's about, when I plan my unit, it takes me about 2 months to cover this. And it ranges from activities, worksheets, assessments, and so on. So this is how I divide my planning. First of all, I start with, why do we study Shakespeare? How do we teach Shakespeare? And what are the best practices to both teaching and retaining interest in Shakespeare? Another dilemma for us teachers is which play to pick. Now, this is harder because students, no matter the age, don't really retain their interest in the subject, the theme, or the topics. So it's really sometimes a challenge for me as a teacher to pick which theme. Of course, depending on the background of the students, the country you teach in, all these are challenges. My go-to plays, and I'm going to say it up front, are a few. The ones I play, like to teach are Hamlet, King Lear, Merchant of Venice, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, and sometimes if I want to challenge myself even further, I'll pick Macbeth. Do we read all the play? That's another important question, which I will try to talk about. Assessments. Assessments is a big question when I teach Shakespeare. What do I assess? Do I assess every single aspect the students are studying? Do I assess their memory? Do I assess the language? a few things that I would like to share with you. The challenges that arise at the end. All these I will try to discuss and tackle in this presentation. Quality teaching modes for better teaching practices. Before I start, I'd like to say that my teaching style is completely student-centered rather than teacher-centered. I'm not the star in the classroom, the students are. It's more of a collaborative kind of effort, collaborative work. Based on my North American training, my Western training, traditional teaching or style is actually frowned upon, where a teacher would stand for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, just talking. This is not the style of teaching that I got to be trained with. Instead, all my classes are student-centered. Students have a big part in their learning journey. They are not merely recipients of the knowledge, but they contribute and add and participate to the understanding and the knowledge. So this is roughly how I would divide my, say, hour and a half of classes. And again, depends on where you are, which country you're teaching in, what level of students you're teaching. Your teaching style, of course, would be different. But say if I have an hour of teaching, the first 15 minutes would be mine. I would shine. I'm the Superman of the 15 minutes. I would do teacher-led questions. I would introduce, I would analyze, I would give a mini lecture to my students. Hopefully, it shouldn't be more than 15 minutes. The next 15 minutes is all student-centered conversations. I'd have a Socratic kind of dialogue where I propose a question and have my students between them, either in small groups, big groups, argue that question. We go through kind of a debate for about 15, 20 minutes max. Students love this. They enjoy it because they get to talk about things that they like. They get to relate their own knowledge, their own understanding to the points. The third 15 minutes is dedicated to application of knowledge. And that's where I give worksheets, presentations, either by myself or by students. And almost always the last 15 minutes of class time is to cement the learning. And that could come through media presentation. So it could either be a documentary I show my students or a short video, whatever kind of media that's available to you. In my slides, you'll see I've put a link to a video, which I'm not going to be showing, but the link is there. You can take a picture of it if you wish. And that's how I go about my hour or so. I try to aim for 15 minutes for every class. It's not ideal. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But hopefully it should work like that. In my teaching, I have 3 stages: the enter stage, the explore stage, and the extend stage. The 3 E's, we call them in education. Each one is or focuses on an aspect of learning. The first one activates learning. The first one initiates the student's interest before dealing with the text. The second is applying or engaging or allowing students an opportunity to discuss. The last is taking the ideas further and trying to relate them to real life, or trying to relate them to prior knowledge. So these are the 3 E's in education, where students undergo 3 main phases, and each phase is geared towards cementing a specific activity or a specific outcome. Again, every class needs to, or every focus in my teaching needs to answer an outcome or an objective. So the goal is, for example, by the end of this class, students would be able to understand a specific act or a specific scene, and so on. This is my layout of my teaching. Every play I teach, every novel I teach, every theme I like to divide my teaching based either on theme or genre. So if I were to teach theme, I would teach, for example, heroism, for example, love. And I would be dealing with poems, novels that talk about that. Or I would do genre, so poetry, novel, short story, and so on. But every fiction, every play would fall under this. There's the pre-reading, during reading, after reading, assessment, and then the challenges that come at the end. And this will be a very interesting slide to talk about. In my pre-reading stages, this is almost what I do. And my students have responded to it very positively over the years. I always start with an anticipation guide, and I'll go further with what it means by anticipation guide, what I mean by anticipation guide. Book cover, for example, I taught my students Animal Farm one time, and I placed 3 covers of the Animal Farm on the board, and I asked them, what do you think the story is about? What are we going to read about? Who are the characters, and so on. Book covers are very, very important. We might overlook them in our teaching, but they're a very good thing to start or to activate interest. Research questions are very important. KWL chart, I'll come to it, mini group research prompts, and finally assessment. And that would be my last slide for this section. So this is my anticipation guide. And for this focus, it was Merchant of Venice. MOV is Merchant of Venice. So this is the anticipation guide. Anticipation guide is the first thing I introduce to my students. It's just very general questions, very general prompts, just to show them or give them a very slight idea of what the play might be about. If anticipation guide doesn't work, and again, depending on the level of students, because as you know, level of students, locality, the geographical location of where you're teaching, be it a university, a school, determines teaching, of course. So one year I did an appreciation walk instead of an anticipation guide. An appreciation walk is I'd have my students stand in a line and ask the question. This works very well with Merchant of Venice because it's about discrimination, of course, as you know. It's about marginalization. It's more about the feelings and emotions of the person. So, for example, I'd ask them, if anybody has been discriminated against, take one step to the front, or take one step back, and so on. That's the appreciation walk. Recently, I did the anticipation guide. I give my students a handout with agree or disagree, very simply. This, as simple as it is, this could take me about 30 or 40 minutes of class time. Students are very much engaged when it comes to these general ideas. So something like, you should always show mercy to others. Agree or disagree. If someone hurts you, they deserve to be hurt equally in return. Agree or disagree. The law should be obeyed by everyone equally. And so on and so forth. Most of them are from, of course, the major ideas are from the Merchant of Venice. I love this. I spend so much time on it because students really enjoy it. Again, this is about the book cover, and I want to say more stuff about the book cover. So when you show the book cover on the screen, make sure you're showing it on a big screen so every student can see. I asked them, take a look. What attracts your attention? What pops out to you? What symbols do you see? Why do you think the symbols are there? What do they represent? What colors do you see? Any visuals? I literally go art on them, and we literally talk about the aesthetic of the book cover. Does this remind you of something in the past? And that's when I ask this question, I'm activating their prior knowledge. So I'm trying to connect, to make that bridge between what they know previously and what they are being exposed to now. I asked them, what do you think the tone of the play might be? Could it be a comedy? Could it be a tragedy? Which is a different story I'll talk about when it comes to the genre. The title, the subtitle, everything. Does it remind you of a movie? Does it remind you of a song? And so on and so forth. Book covers are, I would normally do the book cover and the anticipation guide in the same class, because they're almost the same idea, and I still have the students, I've grabbed their attention, so I normally do that in one class. The next class, or if I have time, depending on which class, again, if I have an hour and a half, this would work as well within the hour and a half. Now I'm going to shift from me being the guide or me being the person who leads. It's the student's turn. And this is exactly when I said student-centered. I provide handouts to students, and we do some research. Again, one of the objectives in my teaching is to allow students the ability to research and to be able to decide which information to use, how to summarize, how to paraphrase. All these are skills we try to teach our students. When plagiarism is 0%, zero tolerance for plagiarism, they need to retell, restate, summarize in their own words. Again, it's a very important skill. Again, Merchant of Venice in mind, I give them the following prompts. I ask them to to research for 15 minutes and then present in another 15 minutes. I would ask specific students to tell me what they found. As a good management skill in the classroom, I put a timer up on the board. I tell them, okay, within these 15 minutes, you are expected to finish your research, because as you know, it's really hard to maintain attendance or student attention for more than 5-7 minutes. But when they have a timer, they're timing themselves. So some of the things I ask them about the Merchant of Venice is what is usury? I ask them about Jews, about the meaning of the word bond. So I asked them, go research the meaning of the word bond. Give me 3 different definitions. And it's their job to tell me what it means. One of them has to have a legality, like a legal meaning about it. I asked them about money lending, for example, and what's the equivalent of the Shakespearean money lending concept in our modern day. So they would tell me something like interest. Okay, where do we find interest? When do we use interest? So just by relating that, I show them how current Shakespeare is to our everyday life. In the West, we pay mortgage. Banks take interest on the mortgage. So that's very usury. That's the whole idea of usury. So students start to connect. Oh yes, what Shylock the Jew did actually is still being done in our lives nowadays. We talk about the ethical, moral justifications that allows someone to dictate on others to change their faith, their beliefs, and so on. Again, all Merchant of Venice in mind. Another activity, and this is all before reading, so I hope you can see that the 3 stages of my teaching is divided into before, during, after. Again, from the book cover or any picture from a play, or even the prologue sometimes have pictures. I ask my students to open that and focus on visual literacy. What do you see in the picture? How many people? What are the people doing? We literally dissect it just to get a better idea of who's in the picture, and do you think their role will be important? And if important, what would they be? I even asked them to guess their names. I did this with Old Man and the Sea. I was teaching Old Man and the Sea, and I asked them, what do you think the name of the old man is? Because the title is The Old Man. Everybody gave me, funny part is everybody gave me white names. So John, Jack, James, and I put them on the board. I didn't respond. I didn't make any faces. I didn't laugh. And then when I revealed the name Santiago, I told them you should have related the location of the novel to the name. But of course, every student just relates their own background to what they read. Okay, another pre-reading strategy. This is also very important. We call it the KWL chart, or predictions, or call it whatever you may, predictions, pre-reading. I normally use the KWL, and that's what I already know, what I want to know, and what have I learned. Now, the KWL chart and the anticipation guide that I introduced early on is a document that we will revisit towards the end. Student responses will be revisited, especially with the anticipation guide, and I will ask them, do you want to change your mind now? Do you still want to agree or disagree? Or you've changed it to something else? For the KWL chart, we leave the third column, which is the L, empty, because that's a reflection later on for students to go back and reflect upon. Okay, so students basically tell me what they already know about Shakespeare, what they want to know, and in this one I divided into two parts: what they know about Shakespeare and the chosen play. So for example, Romeo and Juliet, what they know is they both die. What they want to learn is how they die, and so on, because they're already familiar with the plays and the premise of the play. So this is one of the documents that I go back to often with the anticipation guide. The next stage, again, and this is all pre-reading, we have done nothing yet about the Merchant of Venice or Romeo and Juliet or any drama that I would pick. Now, this is a research prompt or prompts. These are research prompts that I give my students. But before I do that, I share my expectations. And this is very important when we teach a play or a drama, a poem, a novel that students would rarely relate with. So my expectations I share with my students first off is research and retell in your own words. Plagiarism is unacceptable. This develops their writing skills. They will put it all together in class, and this is an in-class work because it's a collaborative work, and then I can monitor them when it's in class, and I dictate on them the kind of presentation that I want it to be. It could either be a slideshow, a PowerPoint, a Prezi, whatever they decide, but they have to consult with me just so I see it's appropriate for the setting. And then they present to class. It's either normally it's in pairs, but depends on the size of your classroom and the prompts. I do 3 people in a group, 2 or 4, depending again on the prompt. Another thing is each group has to propose a question to the audience, to the students listening. Why? Because the presenters are presenting and the audience are just busy doing whatever they want to do. They're not even paying attention to the presenters. But when I ask that they create an original question based on their presentation, everybody has to listen up. Everybody has to join. So these are the expectations I share. These are the groups, or how I put the groups or the prompts that I give them. So of course, Shakespeare's life, 2 students would present, and all the mini questions are inside. Feel free to take pictures, or if you have time to write them down. I ask about education, birth, where he grew up, did he get married, how many kids did he have? So basically, background information about his life. I'm a big believer in the life of an art, like a dramatist or a poet, is very much influential in their work or has impacted their work tremendously. The second one is the audience and the actors. When I tell them that females were not allowed to act on stage, they laugh, because in modern time this is given, right? But back in the day, girls were not expected to act, but boys who have not hit puberty yet would act because their voices are still thin. So this is information new to my students I like to share. You see that at the end, I've proposed the question. Every group has to have a question to the audience. The third one is the theaters and the play. So they would tell me a background of how the playhouses used to look like, and the groups, the companies of the actors, the stage, the names of the theaters. So they would tell me about the Globe, the Rose, and so on. And they need to bring pictures. They need to add pictures in their presentations. I also asked them about the lost years, the lost plays of Shakespeare, the 7 years that he went missing and nobody knew of. They have to tell me something about that fact. I also asked them about the genres. The funny fact is, I had one student, I think I mentioned it, but let me mention it now. I think I have it on another slide. Students are asked to write about or give me an idea of what a comedy is, a tragedy is, or a history is. So we finished Romeo and Juliet, and I asked what genre it is. One student said it's a comedy. Another said, a comedy? I never laughed. So I paused, I stopped, and I said, okay, you haven't laughed for two reasons. Number one, you didn't get the language. Number two, because the idea was not merely for belly laughter, being a farce, and so it's mostly a witty kind of laughter. That's number one. Number two, it ends in marriage, and that's the most important ingredient for a comedy, for it to end in marriage happily. I also asked them to tell me something about the iambic pentameter, so language and sonnets and how many sonnets he's written and so on. We talk about the government, England, background, geographical, historical, and why is it the golden age, the Renaissance and everything, the religious, the social, the political aspects of the time. We also talk about costumes, and students are expected to show me pictures of costumes, what the girls used to wear, what the men used to wear, and so on. And then the last group, which is normally two people, they tell me about the history of the Merchant of Venice. And this is also news to my students when they know that Shakespeare, most of the plots to his play were not original. He has taken them from earlier sources. So when they come back with this research, they're very surprised. And then to the whole class, I ask one question, or I ask them one final research question. Romeo and Juliet, for example, or Merchant of Venice, list for me names of movies, songs, plays, or any form of media that has been produced based on either the Merchant of Venice, Hamlet, and so on. Hamlet, for example, was amazing because one of the cartoons, the Lion King, and they're always surprised when they know Lion King is based on Hamlet. Okay, I hope you had a chance to take a look at the prompts. I didn't go through every single one of them. This is the video. After all the presentations are done, I make sure that my students watch this video. So Straight Outta Stratford-upon-Avon. It's a play on a song, Straight Outta. So the minute they see this, they smile because it's relatable to them. It's a song and it was very famous. Stratford-upon-Avon, the whole video is a one-on-one introduction to Shakespeare, where the presenter gives us a very, very beautiful, about 30 minutes or 25 minutes or so introduction to his life, and he takes us in real life to the places he used to live in. So Stratford-upon-Avon and the house. I was lucky as a young girl with my father to visit Stratford-upon-Avon and the house Shakespeare was born in. So it's still engraved in my memory. Now we come to during greeting. Now this is the bulk of the teaching. This takes me a very long time because I enjoy teaching Shakespeare. I enjoy teaching English in general, but mostly because it's a very dense play. I feel the need to focus on it. So let me walk you through a few of the steps of how I teach Shakespeare. Again, my approach is very student-centered. So these are a few ideas of how to teach it. Again, it's different every single year. It's different based on the group of students, the number of students, the location of where I am, the ages, and so on. Every time I teach Shakespeare, I like to start with an insult activity. And this is just a very simple idea of how to familiarize students with the language. There are so many online, but I try to keep it short and easy. I introduce the genre, and then I'll walk you through the kinds of readings I allow my students to read. So, for example, there's moments of silent reading, group reading, teacher-led reading, which I read, ask for interpretation or meanings of words. This is the very traditional way about it, but I don't do this all the time. I do this every now and then. So every 3-4 classes, I go back, take the lead, and do the reading, and so on. Number 4 is literature circles, and this is a very, very interesting way of allowing students to read. Comprehension questions normally go towards the end of the act, not every scene, because it will be too much and overwhelming. Tests, I'll walk you through the kinds of tests I provide my students. In Canada, all the testing, every test we give should not be based on memory. We follow Bloom's taxonomy, and Bloom's taxonomy is a pyramid where memory is at the very bottom. It's the base of learning. It's the base, but it's not how we assess. I'll walk you through that as well. We act out some scenes, and then we view some scenes. So this is the insult activity. It's simple, it's nice. Some students enjoy it. Of course, we cannot please every single student. But these are some of the insults mentioned in the play, in The Merchant, of course. And I asked my students to translate it to everyday language, to modern day language. So for example, Graciano speaks infinite deal of nothing. So one student told me he speaks nonsense. So that's exactly it. I wanted them to translate it or to interpret it into everyday language. So they would appreciate the language, they would understand the language, and maybe see the humor in it as well. Genre. I find this over the years very important to mention to my students, because sometimes they either forget about it, don't understand it, don't expect it. So comedy is the most important ingredient is marriage and union, improbability and chance, timelessness, and a concentration of events, if I'm reading it correctly. It's not too clear for me. Tragedy is death and separation, fate, temporality, and structured plot. Some of the words are not clear, so I apologize for that. Okay, I normally do show my students a movie. However, I don't show, now let's go back to the basics. Shakespeare was meant to be seen, not read. This was early in when the performances took place, people used to go and enjoy. This year with Romeo and Juliet, I took a different approach. Instead of introducing the play, reading the play to the students, I had them watch the first interaction between the two families. When Tybalt comes in, Mercutio, and all the cousins and the two opposing families come in, and they fight. Now, and then when Prince comes in and gives out the warnings and so on. The goal was to have students understand the kind of strife happening between the two families, to see it, to analyze the appearance, to analyze the setting. I didn't tell them anything. I just showed them and I said, where do you think we are? Why do you think they're fighting? Who is fighting? What are the names? Who intervened in the fight? So by showing them this first scene, it's easier on them to understand. I liked how my students interacted, and I think I will do that often when I teach Romeo and Juliet, is to show them the first scene, and then once they got the idea, we move on to the reading. Now, when I show a movie to my students, I stick with one version. Normally, it's a modern adaptation. So for Romeo and Juliet, I like the Leonardo because it's very true to the book. Merchant of Venice, I like the Al Pacino version because he plays an amazing Shylock. This is the this is the casket scene from the Merchant of Venice. I had one of my students make me the boxes. You can see they look a little bit, they're neat, they were nice. I didn't have all the colors. So this is the casket scene with the gold, the lead and the silver. In them, there's ribbons, and when we open them up, you'll see the scroll, you'll see a picture. I didn't have a picture of Portia, but I placed a picture of someone from the 1600 inside them. They really enjoyed it, and I would ask students to come up and read the scene. So how I did that was I photocopied, I selected lines. I didn't give the whole lines of Morocco, for example, or Aragon or Bassanio. I photocopied and then printed it out on a piece of paper. I had one girl telling me, "Can I always be Portia? Can you pick me?" Students really engaged with these kinds of activities. Literature circle is probably one of the most rewarding styles of reading in my classroom. So I put students in groups of 4 or 5. And then I asked them to divide themselves. This style allows students to take ownership of their learning, to take ownership of the book that they're reading. So one student would be a summarizer, another would be a connector, another would be an illustrator, a presenter, a vocabulary enricher, and a discussion director where they propose some questions at the end. So students will be assigned scenes or acts, depending on where we are. At the end, in order, they will present their scene. So scene 1, this group gets up, I have a summarizer, I have a connector, and so on. And then scene 2, students really enjoyed the style because they have full control of the idea, the theme. And mind you, I do this towards Act 4. I don't do this early on. I do this in Act 4, Act 3 maybe, only because I feel comfortable. By towards Act 4, students have got the idea in a way. This is Bloom's taxonomy, and this is the testing, or this is the style of assessing students. The lowest is remembering. So for example, who said this? This is based on memory. This is frowned upon. We no longer are allowed, even at times, to use that style of testing. We're not expected to ask our students, determine the speaker in the following. We don't do that anymore. We gear towards the first 4 at the very top. So creating, evaluating, and analyzing, and applying. These are the most important 4. Creating could be through essay writing, for example. Evaluating, analyzing, and applying could be through projects or even multiple choice questions which focus on applying knowledge. Now, in the following few slides, I have samples and this is from my actual test that I brought up. Now, I want you to take a look at the question, what is true and perhaps unusual about Jessica's character in this play? Now, students are analyzing. They're not remembering. They are analyzing Jessica's character. So whatever feature or whatever trait she was shown to us, we need to know which answer applies. In a multiple choice, there's 4, 2 are completely wrong, 2 are possible, 1 is 100% possible, the other is about 80% possible. Another one is, Solanio heard Shiloh crying in the street. About what does Solanio imply? This word is very important, imply. This goes hand in hand with apply or analyze, or implying means it wasn't too clear to the student, so he needs to know, or he needs to analyze, he needs to deduct what it really means. What's Shylock most upset about? His knowledge allows him to know which one is the correct answer. So this is the kind of multiple choice I do with my students. And then I ask them about characters. I'll also come into the character analysis and so on. This is probably the most entertaining act for me normally with my students. Act 5, I don't read. I'm just the sage on the stage. I don't teach when it comes to Act 5. However, this is what I do. In a way, I do guide them. However, students have to have control of this stage of knowledge. And I do it with Act 5 again, because I am very comfortable that they have covered all the themes, all the aspects. Language has become familiar to them. They've been tested. They've done a few projects, research. So they are at a good stage of understanding and able to apply their knowledge now. Act 5, I put them in groups. Again, students love working in groups because there's always this student who is weaker in terms of language, for example, and there's another student who's stronger. So I use the stronger student as a scaffold to help and lead the group. Each student is given a role which empowers students. So students are put in groups, and they start to have prompts. So they have to read a scene. And again, as you're familiar, Act 5 could range from 2 scenes, 1 scene, 4 scenes. Normally, it's a shorter act. Act 4 and Act 3 is the bulk of the play. Towards Act 5, we get into shorter scenes, so it's easier. Depends again on the size of the classroom. Students have to summarize the main points or the main ideas, the final points. And how does the subplot complement or contribute to the main plot? So that's an important one with the characters. Who's dead? Who's still alive? How did everybody develop? Which character do you mostly sympathize with and why? Merchant of Venice, I normally ask if, and I'll get to this question later on, about the character of Shylock. We don't see him in Act 5. We leave Shylock in Act 4. And I asked them that question, and I'll get to it towards the end, inshallah, if I have time. I also asked them what's the significance of their scene, and could they write it in a different way? So could they write an alternate ending? Students love this part, where they are the directors, they are the writers, and they have the opportunity to give a different ending. So some would say, I wouldn't force Shylock to convert. I wouldn't take away his wealth, and so on. So students love adding those kinds of additions or renditions, so to speak. After reading. So Act 5, of course, finishes normally based again on Alberta and on the Alberta government. Students write a few essays, and I'll come to talk about it when it comes to assessments. That's why there's only one midway test or two, and essays go towards the end, and it is a fixed essay based on Alberta and the Alberta government and curriculum. So throughout the play, students write journal prompts. I give them about 5 journal prompts for each act. And then students write endings. And then number 3 is the essays I was talking about. So CART, critical analytical response to text. This is a critical analysis of a text. Normally, it's a Shakespearean text. PRT is a personal response to text. This could range from either a Shakespearean drama or a novel based on what we're teaching. So students have a very, very intensive instructional week on how to write a CART and how to write a PRT. It's very taxing for me. It's very exhausting for me because they need to speak about character development, about thematic development, for example, how a character responds to a specific situation. So the recent prompt I provided my students with was, how do convictions impact a person's reactions towards others? How does a person's convictions impact their reactions or their expectations of others? They get to pick whichever character they choose. Mostly my students pick either Portia, Antonio, or Shylock, if it's the Merchant of Venice. They have to talk about 3, because of the body paragraph. So the introduction is 1, the conclusion is 1, and then 3 body paragraphs about the character of Shylock and about how his convictions affects his dealings with others. So that could be through his faith, through justice, and through his hatred towards Antonio, whichever order it may be. And a PRT is a personal response to text. They write a story or they write an essay talking about how this play reminds them of certain instances in their lives. And a final project, and this is the project-based, because in Canada we teach project-based learning, research-based learning, and student-based learning, or text-based learning. This one is a project-based. I normally give them a project, either a writing project or a research project to end the play. These are some of the after reading strategies that, and you'll mostly see its worksheets. So this is a storyboard. It's a retelling of the events with images and with words. Students get to create their storyline, and they have to use their own words. Again, this is a very important skill to teach students, to know how to sequence a story based on the events. The most important, they don't pick everything. Now, this shows the understanding, the knowledge of the students, how much they've grasped of the play, and which event, which incident they can remove or they can add, depending on how important they believe it is. Character analysis is a very, very important aspect. This one is about Romeo and Juliet. As you know, characters have, every character, when we analyze a character, there's internal and external features. Internal is inside, external is the outside. Any character we can tell from what they say, from what others say about them, and from what they do, from their action. So students are expected to take this and apply it to this handout. And then they have to add textual evidence, just so they know where this character has acted like this, what others have said about them, and so on. Another kind of character analysis, this one is about Romeo. And then again, how the character feels, what the character wants, needs, and then a quote. I always ask my students to add a quote, page number as well, or act or scene, act and scene, just so I know they've understood, they've grasped the whole play. And it wasn't just me introducing the play, which is completely random and unrelated to them. The reader response is a very important literary analysis approach to a text. And that's when we make connections with the reading that we've been reading, making connections to the text. This is very important. Students need to know that what they're reading is relatable to their lives. So for example, falling in love as a teenager, every student can relate to that. So that's an opportunity for them to apply and analyze a text from their point of view, from their understanding, and again, from their cultural background as well, from their intellectual background. So making connections is very important, and this goes towards the end because now they have the whole play in mind. Now, let me add the kind of connections that they make. They make a connection to self, to themselves, to another text. So what does this text, which other text does this remind you of? And to the world. So maybe there's an actor or a friend or a family member that this reminds them of. So 3 connections a person or a student can make to self, to text, to world. The last portion of this presentation is assessment. And I think this is the most important part. I did refer to it a little bit, but let's go a little bit more into details. In Canada, and I believe elsewhere, but because my training was mostly in Canada, so I refer to it mostly, there's 2 kinds of assessments. There's the formative and the summative. Formative is to check on learning, is to check on understanding. How do we do that? We do that in 3 ways. And it comes to, I have the same slide, I'll refer to it towards the end. Through observation, through conversation, and through production. So product, whatever the student is producing. Conversation comes in 2 ways. I either talk to my student and ask them questions, see if they understood the points, ask them questions to instigate some answers from them. They could be critical, they could be analytical, they could be simple. I listen on to the conversations that they have with each other. That's when they have group discussions or research, and then the product that they produce. Summative is the one for marks. So that's whatever I decide goes and is evaluated. So I could have essays, projects, tests, self-assessment, standardized tests, because in the West, we have the standardized tests that go and determine averages or degrees or whatever. And portfolios, journals, and so on. Again, this is the kinds of, I tried to put it in a way to give a breakdown of what formative assessment looks like in my classroom and what summative looks like in my classroom. If anybody wishes to take a picture, I don't have to go through it. But basically, it's whatever I've mentioned. And then the challenges. And this is the most interesting part of my teaching, because this is always new. Every class, every group of students brings in their own responses. And this is exactly the reader response or the student response that I look for. Students respond to a text based on their culture, religion, emotion, personal triggers. Merchant of Venice, as you all are aware and know, is the most intriguing and in a way problematic, especially now I'm teaching in Doha, Qatar. So having an anti-Semitic kind of sense or a Jew is a bit problematic. So towards the end, I asked my students, do you feel sympathetic towards Shylock? Some said yes, one said no. No, he deserves everything. He lost everything. He deserved it. He had it coming. He's a Jew. And that gave me an opportunity. Every moment with my students is a teaching and a learning opportunity to explain the difference between the faith, Judaism, and the political ideology, and the difference. So the religious, the cultural, and the cultural is another aspect, and I'll try to end with this one. Romeo and Juliet. The first thing one of my students asked me, why are we reading about a play that promotes teenage marriage and suicide? And I responded, I hope the student was convinced, in a few points. So the first thing I said, the concept of childhood as we know it now was not available back then. So a child, puberty, that as a concept is a modern creation. Now there's childhood, now there's an age where they are adolescents, pre-teens, teenagers, and so on. Back then, 1600, that wasn't the concept. That's number one. Where they lived, the kind of environment, the kind of weather, made them adults hit puberty sooner than the cold places that we live in. So that's another kind of difference of the idea of being a teenager. For Romeo and Juliet, it wasn't really a teenager. They were kind of approaching adulthood, and that's why it was acceptable for them to get married at an early age. Suicide is a factor in life, and I said it just goes to show that premature decisions or insensible choices leads to bad outcomes. And this is exactly what the play was trying to tell us, that unreasonable, immature decisions, unthought of decisions, not thought through, leads to terrible outcomes. And that was exactly the idea behind those two teenagers. And again, yes, I believe it's very much well and alive. This is the slide I mentioned about the conversations and the production. And I guess that's it. That's my presentation. I'll stop presenting for now and open it up for Q&A. I hope I didn't take too long. I hope I didn't bore you to sleep. I hope it was informative. Something you'll take for the next time you'll teach Shakespeare, something you will benefit from in terms of assessments, approaches. That's it. Dr. Alia.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Sumaya. That was wonderful, actually. With each slide, I have lots of questions in head, but I think now we are ready to open the floor for anyone from the attendances to shoot their questions to Mrs. Sumaya.
Sure.
Is there any questions, please? Okay. All right, Mrs. Lamia, please go ahead, Professor Lamia.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mrs. Sumaya, for enlightening and really deeply engaging us in the teaching and in the reading of one of the most well-known authors in the world.
Thank you.
And thanks also to Dr. Alia. My question is that when I recall upon my experience as a student of Shakespeare, not as a teacher, because I am teacher of linguistics, not literature, but I remember when I was taught Shakespeare's plays, according to the textual traditional approach, the emphasis was on the difficult language of Shakespeare, as if we could not understand the play because of language. And at that time, there was an attempt to simplify the text and to adapt it to modern English. And in a way, I thought it lost the essence of the plays. And that's why I cannot remember really very well the fun in these plays or the morals of these plays that much. And I do agree with the saying, Shakespeare was meant to be seen than to be read, because I remember when after finishing reading the plays, we were allowed to to watch the TVs, some films, films on these plays, and I really understood much better than reading the play. So because in fact, I think acting and reading aloud would help a lot in understanding the plays. If you agree with me, and I have heard that it was recently announced that 38 playwrights were asked to translate Shakespeare's plays to modern English. I don't know whether this is true or not. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lamia. I completely agree with you. Yes, the language is very hard to understand even by us who teach it often. I've been teaching it for more than 7, 8, maybe 10 years. I lost count, to be honest with you. Every time I learn something new. However, we're always advised never to use the abridged version because it just loses its beauty, the language. Some books have the glossary on the side, so my students always go back and read it and make sense of it. I'm always there to help them with the analogies, with the references, but definitely it's a hard text to understand. In addition to the language, we take out the themes, we take out the plot, the characters, but I completely agree with you, of course.
Yeah, because the other thing is that we were taught too much outside information about the writer, about the Elizabethan age, more than the play itself. So we have the opposite of Bloom's taxonomy. We start with memorization, understanding, and at the end, we have the idea of analyzing. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Lamia. The questions goes to Professor Mona Al-Alwan, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. First, I would like to thank Sumia for this beautiful, wonderful, and extremely engaging presentation. It has been such a wonderful, comprehensive presentation about all the great activities that you have been doing with your students. And being myself, a Shakespeare specialist, my PhD was in Shakespeare and the theater of the absurd. So what I did in my thesis actually is that I explored so many of the modern adaptations of Shakespeare. This, of course, Professor Lamia's question about the proposals to turn Shakespeare into modern English, I haven't heard of it, but it sounds absurd because it will definitely ruin Shakespearean language. It's the most beautiful, language in the world. I mean, I'm just probably biased for Shakespeare. I love reading the plays over and over again. It has been, I've been teaching it all my life. Anyway, so Lamia's comment reminded me of all the adaptations, the modern adaptations of Shakespeare that I tackled in my PhD dissertation. And I was wondering whether you ever thought of showing your students some of these modern adaptations, because probably it would appeal more to them, than probably the original text or whatever. What you've been doing with the text is marvelous. It's really marvelous. I wish all our drama teachers would make use of these presentations, and we are going to have it on our YouTube channel. We have a YouTube channel, the Iraqi Women in Humanities Scholars YouTube channel, which is open to all people. It's not like our platform is private. It's a private group, but our YouTube channel is open to all. And I would really recommend it to all teachers of Shakespeare. Thank you very much. And I would like to listen to your response to my suggestion about the adaptations. There are so many modern adaptations, so many, and they were all done by great authors, dramatists, modern dramatists.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. Yes, To be honest with you, depending on which version I have available to me, wherever I'm teaching it, I pick it up and teach. Modern adaptations are equally good. However, most of the books I've used, the Penguin, for example, books, they would have the glossary. So keep the Shakespearean version of the play with even with the shortened words. So o'er, which is over, just to fit the iambic pentameter scale. I haven't taught the modern adaptations because they were not available to me. You know, in a university or in a school, textbooks are provided by the administration. So I wouldn't mind it. It's easier. It's easier for sure if I were to read it.
No, I think you misunderstood my question.
Sorry.
The adaptations I tackled in my dissertation were not actually like modern adaptations of the language of Shakespeare. No, the adaptations were written by Thomas Stoppard, for example, others, great writers, modern drama writers, who actually took the whole idea, the same characters, Hamlet and, you know, and all the other characters, but they put it in modern guise. They actually they turned Hamlet into a modern Hamlet. You know what I mean? So it's not an adaptation of the language. It's actually adaptations of the play. Creating a new, different play from the writer's point of view, tackling modern themes, modern motifs, you know, modern anxiety, everything like this. So
the best example would be Rosencrantz and Guildenstern by Tom Stoppard.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. This is one of the plays by Thomas Stoppard. So I'm just an example. There are many modern adaptations. That's a sign that Shakespeare will never die.
Exactly.
He's a classic, but he's for all times.
That's so true, and such a good idea. I haven't done it in that way only because, again, in Alberta, we are dictated on teaching Shakespearean play.
Yeah.
But that's a beautiful idea. Definitely, it's nicer. I loved Rosencrantz when I studied it in my 4th year in Baghdad. So yeah, definitely a beautiful idea. However, within the framework that I'm at, it has to be a Shakespearean text per se. Yeah. Thank you for the suggestion. Yeah, that's an amazing one.
But you know, it will always be enriching for our students, like to tell that there are modern adaptations. Some of the students would really feel more at home in these adaptations because they tackle the characters are modern, the themes are modern, the problems are modern. So that's it. That's what I meant. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful. Very grateful.
Thank you, Professor Mona. I think now the floor goes to Dr. Arij Al-Khafaji. Please go ahead, ask your question.
Good evening, everybody. Nice to join this very rewarding and highly inspiring presentation by Dr. Sumia. Thank you very much, Ms. Sumia.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the way you present yourself teaching in Doha.
Thank you.
Recently, I have a special interest in what you called student-based rather than teachers-based methods of teaching. And I think we are far, far, far away from following these methods in our academic classrooms in Iraq. In fact, being a teacher myself, I've noticed that there are certain extents. I mean, how far can we go with the student-based rather than teachers-based methodologies? As a teacher, I've noticed that there are certain texts which are not suitable at all to be taught in a student-based methodology, especially texts which are carrying certain basic knowledge. Of course, Iraqi students generally came to the universities with very shallow knowledge of English, I mean English language. And we start teaching them Shakespeare in the second stage, Marlowe, and then Shakespeare in the third stage, in fact. So Shakespeare taught in a student-based methodology is a bit difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to wait until the students would develop their English language in a way that would enable them to participate actively inside the classroom.
True.
Another experience which I got from teaching English literature, I mean, with all the genres, you know, that in Iraq, we, especially in the governorate, we don't stick to the specialization, especially in the early years of our teaching. So we taught all genres. I mean, I taught all genres until lately I stick into my specialization, which is poetry. I've noticed that there are certain texts which invite us, oblige us, force us to teach them in a student-based method, especially the texts which are called nowadays postmodern.
Mm-hmm.
In most of the postmodern texts, whether in drama, novel, or poetry, there is a very clear invitation to the reader to participate. So I would like to call it participatory methods rather than student methods, because student methods, I think, would go far away from being controlled by the teachers. And all what you have presented up till now is teacher controlled. Starting from choosing the text, then the way that you develop your pedagogical terms and your activities, they are all controlled by you. But the student-based methods would go so far to the extent that the student would participate in writing, and I'm using here the postmodern or the post-structural concept of writing, which is partly reading, interpreting the text. The student would participate to put the end to the text, to let certain characters go this way or that way. I mean, certain attempts like Thomas Toppar's Guildenstern and Rosencrantz, this way is a kind of student-based, let us say, participation in a Shakespearean text, which is called Hamlet, in the way that it makes us as readers and audience see the Shakespearean characters in a new light. Thank you very, very much for your very, as I told you, inspiring and highly rewarding lecture. I wish you all the best, and I wish everybody a very good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Arij. You know what? You mentioned valid points, to be honest with you. Here's the difference. When you teach ELL students, learners of the language, EFL learners, so English foreign language learners, and native speakers of the language. Most of my training and most of my teaching has been geared towards speakers of the language, of the English language. Yes, Shakespeare is a highly elevated style of Shakespearean language, sorry, is a highly elevated style of writing. That's true. It's easier for my students who who have less difficulty than the majority of Iraqi students when it comes to teaching or comes to dealing with a Shakespearean text. However, even when I'm teaching native speakers of the language, there are still some difficulties. However, the challenges are less. So they still use dictionaries, they still use a translator to translate a few lines for them. I still help them. Everything is still difficult. However, the challenges are less. The problem with our ESL learners or EFL learners, their challenges are double. They need to know the basic language in addition to the Shakespearean language. Now, I need to mention something, that Shakespeare is introduced in Canada towards the higher grades, not the lower grades. So even in Canada, we only introduce Shakespeare in the last two levels of learning, because we understand how challenging this text is. Yes, my classes, or even the approach, it's not my class. I didn't invent the teacher-centered or the student-centered. That was not me. It's the training that I went through. There has to be a teacher-centered, or there has to be a teacher-led moments, not moment, because otherwise students don't have that kind of guidance. Students don't have that kind of role model to follow. So what I do is I model the lesson to them in the first few classes, say even in the first few weeks, and then when students are ready, they take over. That's why most of the research is either done early on with background information or later when students are familiar. Challenges are less. I have to be honest with you. Yes, challenges in Iraq are more. Students can barely sometimes put 3, 4, 5 sentences together, and now we're asking them to analyze a Shakespearean play. I'm not too sure. And it's, as you said, it takes years for our mentality to change from a teacher-led to a student-led. Students need to know that this learning is, they have a hand in their learning. They are the ones who are developing this essay. They are the ones who are writing this. So yes, that's the difference. The Western approach has expanded and has gone towards the student center for a long time now. So when we come as teachers, this is taken, this is given. We are no longer the stars of the show. Students are. I agree with you, it's a sad reality, but I mean, we try. And that's why we have those PDs, that's why we have those exposure to knowledge, I guess.
May I say something to this very important, very important.
Go ahead, please, Dr. Mona.
Issue. I agree with Sumia that although our students' English is weak and it's not really the standard that we would, expect or aspire to, but the teacher has always to do this. I mean, let's begin at least with our students. I know that up till today, the teachers, drama teachers, not all of them, but the majority of drama teachers in Iraq go into the class, they read, they try to explain, students listen. They don't use, a lot of strategies at all. I know that from experience. So what Sumia has just said is quite okay, quite correct, and we have to start, we have to begin. Even native speakers don't understand Shakespeare. I did that too. I used to study, to teach Shakespeare as a TA in America a long time ago. The students don't understand Shakespeare at all. Okay, their spoken English is great. This is their native language, but the teacher faces the same challenges. So in Iraq, our students, yes, come their language, but we should not really take it for granted, and we should not depend on this fact that we cannot really kind of introduce new strategies. We make them the stars, as Sumia says. The teacher is there to control, but the students have to have a role in it. otherwise they would not learn. And this is the way to make them appreciate the play. So maybe not all the strategies are easy to do, but at least our teachers have to kind of start using strategies, changing their method, the old method of lecturing and explaining or whatever. So I quite agree with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's listen to Dr. Anan. You have a question? Anan Al Kaissi Yusuf.
I don't have really a question. I'm quite, really amazed by your presentation. Definitely, and we do that actually. It's not that we never, do that. Whether drama teachers, I respect your opinion, Dr. Huna, and true that we face lots of challenges, with our students, but we do at least, as matter of like dividing the class into groups. And trying to make them come up with some assumption. Like for me, I do it in poetry. Every group will take a stanza, for instance, from the poem, and then come up with at least they come up with an understanding of what is the significance of that stanza. What does it mean, and and then I sometimes also I it's not that always. I have to be honest. Like, what if you write rewrite the title of the poem? What would it be for you? All right, and how would you relate to it? Definitely, it's not that is about the reader response. Perhaps we don't use the exact terms, but we do that, as techniques of our, let's say, the mechanics of our pedagogy. But definitely we have challenge. What would you do, Sumia, if you have students who struggle, with the language, for instance? What would you do?
Yeah, that's true, Anan. I agree with you. It's a struggle. It's a struggle two ways: the language itself, and then the Shakespearean language. So what would I do? I don't know. I haven't been put in that position before. Maybe use an abridged text instead of the Shakespearean. However, you're jeopardizing the language in that sense. So I'm not a fan of abridged Shakespeare texts at all. It is a challenge. Maybe introduce Shakespeare towards the later stages of university. Maybe in year 3 or even 4. Believe it or not, we teach Shakespeare year 4, and that's where most of the assessments take place, because students have been exposed to literature, have been exposed to poetry, have been exposed. But I don't know. Again, it's whatever the administration dictates. It's whatever the university, or however things work, right? But I hear you, and as I agree with you, those strategies that I introduced, these are not new. I didn't make them up. Teachers all around the world do them in one form or another. I bet you in one form or another you would say, oh, I do that, but not the same kind of way. Because we come into teaching with a passion, and we are very creative as teachers. Students dictate on us as well on how to be creative. And it's not new. However, it is a challenge. Everywhere it's a challenge, even in Canada.
Exactly, Sumaya. What our teachers do sometimes is that they show the students, the play produced as a movie. Yeah. So that would be another way also, to get so much in touch with the event, with the characters, with the language, once they hear it from native speakers. That would be another. And even, way back, before in our department, they used to make performances. Like, we take one scene and we choose some students. They would, perform. They would, they would be the characters of. And we did that a few years back. Yeah. That would be also, another way. To make them really, and whatever you have mentioned about the techniques and even the assessment, and that would be also applicable for our drama teachers in the MA level or the PhD program.
Exactly.
That can be applied, because after all, MA level and PhD, requires more of a critical thinking and reader's response and students and contribution after all to the text.
Thank Assistant Professor Anan. It's nice meeting you. I'm so glad you are doing all this. When I said the majority of our drama teachers, I did not say all drama teachers. I'm sure there are drama teachers, qualified drama teachers like you here and there, and I'm really glad to know. Thank you very much for your comments and everything.
And I just want to tell you, Dr. Muna, that during my teachings of drama classes, I used to create games inside the class so that we can comprehend the themes of the play more. And I have few of my students still telling me how they still remember the themes and the characters of Hamlet and Twelfth Night and all the characters we played together in the class.
I'm sure you're a great teacher yourself, Alia. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear that.
Dr. Amra Brahim, please go ahead. I'm sorry we kept you waiting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have interested in your presentation, especially the part of teaching methods of drama. And I think that student-based, student-centered approach is more influential in teaching the drama, especially Shakespearean play, because participating the students about the language and using genre-based instruction is more influential to understand the text. So we must try to make students participate, and we must try to drag them to the situation of being able to analyze the language and the theme of the play. Thank you very much, and I agree with you that a student center is more influential, and we have made many experiments about these ways of teaching. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. You're most welcome.
We look forward to presenting more lectures about this.
Thank you.
This topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Sumia.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a good night, everybody.